right. Today I'm going to be doing a reputation speech on Taylor Intrican's major claim. His major claim is video games improve cognitive development in youth. I would like to define youth today using ESRB, which is who rates the games, all video games that are publicly known. They use ratings such as E, M, and T for teen. E is for everyone, and M is for mature. I'm going to use the ratings between E and M, which is for ages 10 and up to 17 and up. I'm going to use everything in between there to define youth today, since we were talking about video games. His secondary claim is playing video games improves decision making. His secondary claim is playing video games improves problem solving skills. And his third secondary claim is video games improve social skills. Today I'm going to work in a backwards manner. I'm going to start at his third secondary claim and work my way forward. I'm going to start out with video games improve social skills. While video games may improve social skills among people who play them, there is no association between social skills and cognitive thinking in youth. According to dictionary.com, the definition of cognitive is of or relating to the mental process of perception, memory, judgment, and reasoning as contrasted with emotional and volitional processes. According to dictionary.com, the definition of social is relating to, devoted to, or characterized by friendly companionship or relations. I don't see any connection between the two. That was his third secondary claim, video games improve social skills. Now I'm going to move to his second secondary claim, which is playing video games improves problem solving skills. Taylor Intrican provided evidence from a journal article titled Policy Insights from the Behavioral and Brain Sciences 2.1 by C.S. Green. The evidence that Taylor provided states, training on Portal 2, a popular 3D puzzle game, elicited improvements in problem solving and spatial reasoning. However, the same article that he used as evidence also states, one study which lumped all video games together found that the total amount of video game play predicted poor attention in classrooms. This is a good example of the fact that not all games are likely to affect the cognitive system equally, nor are the effects likely to be positive. That was from the same article that he used as evidence. Many studies done also show that many video games that do influence cognitive thinking are related to violence, such as first-person shooter video games. Many of these video games also have a negative effect on behavior in our youth, making them defiant towards authorities and aggressive towards peers. According to an article on harvard.edu titled Harvard Mental Health Letter, half of all video games rated by the ESRB contain violence, including more than 90% of those rated as appropriate for children 10 and above, our youth. The same article states, reviewing psychological studies, research studies, and large observation studies have found an association between violent video games and an increased thinking and behavior in youths. According to the ESRB, Portal 2 is rated E for everyone ages 10 and up. ESRB's content descriptors rate this game to have fantasy violence and mild language. Even though games such as Portal 2 may improve problem-solving skills, they also promote violence and mildly offensive languages for everyone ages 10 and above. So today I've told you guys so far about how video games improve social skills, a reputation towards that. His secondary claim, playing video games improves problem-solving skills, and now I'll do his last one. Taylor's his first secondary claim is playing video games improve decision thinking. Taylor Intrican provided evidence from a study done in 2015 at Brown University stating the frequent gamers showed average improvement 10% for the first background, whereas non-gamers showed little to no average improvement. Taylor Intrican did not provide further that the experiment done at Brown University was done on 18 participants, ages 18 to 25. 9 participants were frequent gamers, 2 of them were female, and 7 were male, with an average age of 19.94. The other 9 participants were non-gamers, 8 of them were females, and 1 was a male, with an average age of 19.56. Brown University states in their concluded research, it is important to note the limitations of this study, specifically the small number of subjects in each group data. Brown University also states in their concluded research, our efforts with data collection revealed that many frequent gamers happen to be male, thus making it difficult to balance the gender ratio in our participant pool. We attempted to diversify our data collection as much as possible considering this finding, but we are only able to a limited extent. That's the same research that he used when he made his original claim. Taylor made his original claim. Well, frequent gamers showed an improvement in only one of these two studies done at Brown University. There's not enough evidence to conclude that video games improve cognitive development in our youth. Taylor Intrikin provided data from University of Rochester that shows them to believe video games encourage faster decision making. According to a 2014 article titled, Regular Exercise Changes the Brain to Improve Memory and Thinking Skills, author Heidi Godman of Harvard University writes, there are plenty of good reasons to be physically active. Big ones include reducing the odds of developing heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. Author Godman also writes, indirectly, exercise improves mood and sleep and reduces stress and anxiety. Problems in these areas frequently cause or contribute to cognitive impairment. Well, there are studies that show there may be a link between video games and cognitive development. Other studies show that there are things such as exercise that can improve cognitive thinking and provide additional benefits. Today I refuted Taylor's claim. His major claim was video games improve cognitive development in our youth. I started out with his third secondary claim, video games improve social skills. Moved to his secondary claim, playing video games improve problem-solving skills, and then to his last claim, or his first one, playing video games improves decision-making. Thank you. Oh, I did? I didn't see the last one. Good job. Thanks.
All right, Michael. You're very clear at the beginning, identifying what you see as a difference between what is defined as youth and what the research seems to be suggesting as youth. And you have an interesting criteria that uses the standard that is in the industry, you know, the SRB rating. So I thought that that was a pretty effective idea to start with, that we're not necessarily talking about the same groups of people with the evidence that the advocate's using. So that's a good precursor to your supporting points. You remind us of what the secondary claims are of the advocate very clearly, so that's easy to follow. It's an interesting choice to go kind of in reverse order. I think I understand why you started on the last point first, because it was the one that had the least amount of relevance from your point of view to the claim that's being presented, and you want to get it out of the way. I'm not exactly sure why you kept that order, you know, why you kind of went in the reverse order on the other issues, but that's fine. It wasn't a big problem as long as people were paying close attention. If we were taking a flow of the arguments, you know, keeping track of the arguments as we were following along in a debate, it would be a little bit confusing because then you're jumping around on the issues. And if somebody misses the label that you gave, it would be hard to keep track of. And we want to make sure when we start the debates that you are ready to do those kinds of things. Because everybody's going to be, you know, we're going to have 4 people talking about a whole bunch of issues over the course of 8 speeches. And if it's not clear and people aren't following a particular structure, it gets to be a little bit confusing. But I didn't have a problem following yours. Like I said, I thought it was pretty straightforward. You label the points internally very clearly. Like I said, on that first point, I think that I like the challenge that you have based on the definitional criteria that you had for both cognitive and social. That makes sense. And the explanation about how it's not related, I think, could be a little bit stronger, but you've made a good push on that argument, and I think the definitional questions help you quite a bit. The second point is also nicely labeled. You summarize what the advocate's argument is pretty well. There's very good follow-up on the advocate's evidence on this, suggesting that maybe the advocate's own evidence doesn't really reach the conclusions that the advocate is suggesting here. There are good questions about whether or not the information is strong enough to make these inferences, and then you've got this whole argument that suggests that in fact there are perhaps negative consequences to playing these particular games, and you mentioned the violence and the language issues. I do think that you might want to follow up a little bit and talk about how the influence of violence might affect cognitive thinking, and then I think it would have a little bit more direct application to the problem-solving thing. As it is, it sounds more like it's a rebuttal argument for a policy issue rather than an answer to the issue of whether or not it helps with problem-solving. But I did think that you had some good, like I said, presses on those sorts of things. And the other thing that you follow up with is that the number of people who are playing these games, they're not all playing the one that you're describing, Portal 2, or that the advocate was describing, but half of the games contain, they're playing violent games, and 90% of those are the ones that are being played by youth. So the idea that this is improving our society, I think there's a good press on that particular point. On the third point, which is actually the first point, I thought that you did a really good job kind of going to the advocate's original source, finding the caveats that are built into the evidence that the advocate is using, pointing out here's what the study consisted of, and here are some problems with that study because of the sample that they had a whole bunch of things here. And you managed to do that without making the sexist comment that would be so easy to have slipped into and would probably have offended part of our audience. So I thought that was a pretty reasonable way of addressing that issue. And there was one section right at the end where it sounded like it was a quote, but I couldn't tell if it was a quote or your summary of the point, and I thought that needed to be a little bit clear. So organizationally, everything's solid. I thought you had excellent analysis of the evidence. I think your reasoning challenges could be a little bit stronger. I understood the one on the first point. I think you could follow up a little bit more on that. The one major weakness in the presentation is that you're doing all reading. It's like you never look up. You lucked out because on the refutation speech you get a couple of weeks to get ready, and so you've got a whole script here. When you were making these arguments in the debates, you're not going to have that much time, and you have to speak a little bit more extemporaneously, and that'll help your credibility also. In my public speaking classes, I mention things when I see them, not because I'm trying to drag people down, just trying to help folks. I've made plenty of mistakes. Spatial is the word that you were looking at, and you said it incorrectly, and it sounded like spatule. Spatule would be something that you flip a pancake with. Spatial is, our sense of area around us. So just one of those things that you kind of want to make sure that you get right, because that's when people hear you saying something like that and say, what did he say? What are they talking about? And you're supposed to be making an argument that says, I know what I'm talking about here, and if it sounds odd, people may alter their perception of your ethos. Yes. Okay, thank you.